Welcome into episode 16 of Jacket Sports Weekly. I'm Anthony DeFilippo. It was a jam-packed week for Waynesburg sports. We'll have a lot to talk about with our analysts for wrestling, indoor track and field, men's and women's basketball. Stay tuned right here to Jacket Sports Weekly.
Welcome to Jacket Sports Weekly, Waynesburg University's weekly sports show where we cover the best of the best in athletics. Our analysts discuss a multitude of highlight plays such as touchdown passes.
And Barber's going to throw again, one-on-one. Does he got it in him? That's a catch! Tyler Richmond with flags thrown everywhere makes the catch! Touchdown, Waynesburg!
And ones.
This was low, Waynesburg's going to get it! Suggs is going to pull away here, go for the layup, and it's going to fall in and one! PJ Suggs!
And home runs.
Higgins drives one to left field. The left fielder running back, and that ball is out of here. Grace Higgins.
Join us every Wednesday to see what's new in Waynesburg University athletics.
And welcome back into Jacket Sports Weekly. I'm still your host, Anthony DeFilippo. Let's get into our segments. I have my co-host, Brett Gambita, and down at the far end, Vinny Heller, to talk about indoor track and field. So, Vinny, what were your thoughts on the Bob Shannon meet last week?
So definitely the scores don't really show exactly how they did, as I should say. Men's 8 out of 9, women's 8 out of 9 as well. But the real factors is they're playing and running against D2 teams, multiple in fact. The only teams from D3 and the PAC was Case Western, W&J, and Waynesburg. So this is definitely playing a huge factor in showing how our athletes are producing and getting at their events and how they're really growing throughout the season.
So what is it like as a D3 athlete to go against certain D2 opponents in these meets?
It's definitely, I should say, humbling to show where you're at, really. However, as I've said in previous episodes, these schools have more time, they have more facilities, they have more to it that they're able to get into it. As Waynesburg, so say, as I've said, summer football athletes running track, they're just getting back into it. So it's definitely a switch of mindset as you're going against bigger and better opponents as a littler school just trying to climb and show their progress and process.
Well, as Brett just mentioned, the D2 schools, Waynesburg actually had one of the better times for D3 schools in the 4x400 relay. What did you think from that performance and the four individuals who competed in that?
I definitely think all four showed out. It was unexpected is last week our relay teams did not do too well, but this week showing out against these big schools, that's special, along with some of our distance runners placing big high and top 10 like Quentin Weaver, first in the 800 overall, not just in the PAC. Definitely these athletes getting out and placing high against the D2 teams is special and shows their growth throughout this season so far.
You mentioned Quentin Weaver. Now, can you talk about some of the other athletes who had some pretty big impacts on this meet?
I would say is my first go-to, Ella Rochelle coming back. As she did not race last week, she placed 5th in the 200. That's also the number 2 in the PAC, along with 5th in the 400, number 4 in the PAC. Definitely her. Jacob Harker didn't have his best week. He placed 3rd in the shot put. Garrett Hiller had a season best in the shot put with the 12.52. Someone I didn't see as much this week was Maggie Clare. She placed 8th, which is not her best. She's definitely shown out more before this. However, like I keep coming back to it, it's the bigger teams. And as a freshman, you're in a whole new world now. Whereas outdoor track, you might be facing more teams from the PAC getting down to your level, I should say.
How important is it to continue building on things, Vinny, as we head towards, the next meet and moving towards the end of the indoor season?
I would definitely point out Quentin Weaver he's kind of winding down. However, I think he'll be somebody to watch in the PAC championships, but it's definitely becoming probably a mental struggle is you're versing these D2 teams and you're not seeing who you're really going against in competition. However, it's definitely time to stay mentally keen and keep your body sharp so when you face these teams in your level, I should say, you have a day. As you keep showing out and putting up these numbers that they have, it'll become a greater difference when you're versing teams at your level.
The Ohio Wesleyan Open is up next. What are you expecting from the teams as they head there?
There's no other teams in the conference attending. So I'm definitely expecting them to do what they've been doing. Keep putting up higher numbers. Like I said, it's hard to show where you really place against these teams, so I can't expect high placings from either team. However, I can definitely see their numbers showing what they've really done.
Vinny, thanks for joining us up here.
Thank you, guys.
Look forward to the indoor track and field team completing its season here in the next couple of weeks before outdoor track and field really gets underway. When we come back, we'll talk wrestling with Mo Kiger, so keep it right here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Oh, I didn't see you there. I'm Mia Hinkins, and welcome to Buell Hall, home of Waynesburg University's Department of Communication. If you visit our campus, you'll have the opportunity to attend some comm classes, enjoy lunch with our students, and watch us in action. We hope to see you here soon at Waynesburg University.
To schedule your personal visit, go to waynesburg.edu/admissions/schedule-visit. Come grow with us at Waynesburg University.
And we're back on our second segment of Jacket Sports Weekly. I'm Anthony DeFilippo, still your host, joined by my co-host Brett Gambita and Mo Kiger down at the end to talk some wrestling. So Mo, what do you think? What have you thought about this season so far? PAC Championships are coming up this weekend.
There's a lot of things that we could take away from this season. One being Jesse Orban. He has had a phenomenal season. He actually just got his second title this past weekend. And a lot of other good wrestlers have came out. A lot have got their first collegiate wins this season. And the team is really looking forward to next season. They look like they have a really good team going in the next season. I do want to talk about Jesse Orban and his season so far, as he went undefeated throughout the whole entire season and had two phenomenal tournament placements, placing first. And this past weekend, he beat number 3 regional ranked Remington Bowery to win his second title. So that was huge. I actually had an interview with him over this weekend, and he said that beating a ranked wrestler that was ahead of him in the regional was amazing going into PACs, because that just gives him the confidence that he needs in order to win at the PAC tournament.
So what do you think makes Jesse Orban so successful as a wrestler?
He's a very great wrestler, as I've been saying. He likes to put the time in. This is his sport. He's been doing it since he was little. He absolutely takes time and pride into practice. He does it to perfection. So if it's not right, he will go back until it is right. He works on it mechanically and fundamentally, and he hits the weight room. That's pretty much the big part about this, is as a wrestler, you have to hit the weight room, because it's a different level when you get to college wrestling.
Who do you think made the biggest jump this season?
Seth Evans, actually. I will look back at last year's season. He was mid, and then he took a major jump this season, as he has had a winning record. He's going into the PAC tournament not all healthy, and he's looking to win this PAC tournament. And he's had a phenomenal season also, as this past weekend he went 1-2, and he pinned the kid, which is amazing. But then he lost his next 2 matches, then he looked at his match and realized what he has to do, and he really takes the time to look at the mechanics and to see what he has to change.
So Seth Evans is going to graduate. Aiden Bischoff's going to graduate. Jesse Orban, we're sure, is going to continue his reign of dominance over the PAC. But is there any other players or athletes on the current roster that you're looking forward to watching next year?
Ryland Parker. I looked at him briefly, and I've seen that he had a great season this year. I know that he didn't get much wins, but he can really look back on this and at the wins that he did make and the losses that he made and improve on what he needs to improve on. And of course, with the coach, he can work with the coach as the coach can tell him, hey, you're doing this wrong. And he can work on changing his mechanics and fundamentals and become a better wrestler.
Brett just jumped to next season, but let's dial it back a little bit to 3 days from now on Saturday, the PAC Wrestling Championships. What do you hope to see out of the team then?
I hope to see them perform, especially Jesse Orban and Seth Evans, as they're the two big ones. The other wrestlers, I'm looking for them to really excel this tournament, as most of them, it's going to be their first PAC tournament. And they're going into it strong. They have a healthy team going into it. And of course, Aiden Bischoff is coming back to wrestle this PAC tournament. That is huge for Waynesburg. He's been getting in shape, but I'm looking for Jesse Orban to place, Seth Evans to place, Aiden Bischoff to place. Those other teams, the other wrestlers are going to be pushing to place. And we might get a surprise and see a freshman win the PAC tournament from Waynesburg.
With Aiden Bischoff missing some time, what do you think he's been doing to get back into the swing of things to prepare for these PAC championships?
He has been going to AT. I've seen him down there, and he really takes the time to work back into things. He didn't jump right back into it, because if he jumped right back into it, he would have got injured a lot more than he already has been. So he was taking it nice and easy, working with Coach McKinney and doing the little things. And then he's just gotten bigger and stronger over this course of the year and while he was off for that amount of time with his injury.
Last year, Washington and Jefferson hosted the PAC Championships. This year, it's Waynesburg. What kind of an advantage do you think that gives the Yellow Jackets hosting it on their home floor this year?
That's a really big advantage, as the wrestlers feel comfortable here at Waynesburg in the Rudy Marisa Fieldhouse, and they know how it feels like to wrestle at Waynesburg and what the temperature is going to be like, and they know where everything's at. If they need to go do something, they know where it's at. If they need to go work on something, they know where the wrestling room's at. So it's a huge advantage.
Well, Mo, thank you for joining us to talk about some wrestling. PAC Championships coming up this Saturday. When we get back here on JSW, Joey Cirillo will be here for women's basketball talk. Welcome back into Jacket Sports Weekly. Anthony DeFilippo, Brett Gambita still up here. We're now joined by Joseph Cirillo to talk about some women's basketball. So, Joey, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
A 76-61 win over Westminster the last time out for the women. Kind of a slow start, though. So how can they avoid that in the upcoming game against St. Vincent?
Well, the biggest thing to understand is that there's always been a quarter that has not worked out well for this women's team. It used to be that third quarter early into the season and then in the previous season, but now they've been really working on that third quarter coming out of halftime, and they've been able to do really well. And this first half has kind of been, and that first quarter specifically, has been something that's suffered a little bit from that. In this case, I think it's mainly just because Coach Jones really does want to put his starters in and then have them come out within the first 5 minutes and get the other players that he's going to want to be playing at some point during the game. He wants to get them in pretty early on. So in this case, I think it's more of that fact of he's just trying to keep everyone warm at one time, and it's kind of hurting them a little bit. They're not being able to get a flow, to get a consistency that they've been able to find going into that second quarter and then going into that second half as well.
We saw Macy Justice start on Saturday. What do you think she's done this year to kind of earn her spot in that area?
She's been able to do everything. She's been able to shoot the threes, be able to find it at down low, maybe just do a jumper or a simple layup. And then she's also at the line. She has been consistent. Now, sometimes some games are better than others, and some games she maybe doesn't even go to the line at all. But in these facts, it's more of she just continues to find abilities to find shots or find other players that can dish it out and find other points. She's been able to do that really well, and that I think that has earned her starting spot. And I definitely agree with Coach Jones on this, that Justice should get that starting position. And I definitely agree that she's worked hard towards it. She's shown that she can do that. And rewarding her with that starting position, I think, is a great idea. And seeing her more on the court along with some other players as well that we'll hopefully get into a little bit later, I think is definitely a key aspect onto why this team is continuing to succeed late into the second half, but also late into the season.
You mentioned that early on in the first quarter, Sam Jones likes to get a lot of his bench players in. So Waynesburg actually runs one of the deepest rotations in the PAC. Do you think this benefits them?
I think at some points it benefits them. I think the biggest factor is that it benefited them going into this Westminster game. Normally I'm talking about Tora Wazalowski or Jules Moorbacher or Callista Friday in a lot of these games, but for this Westminster game it wasn't really like that. Bench players and Clara Paige Miller had 13 points, 20 total minutes, which I think is more on the higher end than we normally see from her, and 8 total rebounds. And she was 100% from the three-point line, going 3 for 3. But then also you had Maddie Dayton that normally comes off the bench, 13 points, 5 rebounds, 6 from 10 from field goal. And then you have Mia Hankins, good starter, 15 total points, one of her highs in this past season. The last time she had 18 points against St. Vincent, that was back in November. I think it's one of those things is that it could be any player that does good on this team, and that having that deep bench can definitely be a factor and a winning factor for this team. And it's been showing that lately, and especially in this Westminster game that we had.
Well, Brett already asked about the slow start, but they did not start slow in that second half. They shot well from 3. They shot well from the field overall. What did you see from the team? You already talked about Mia Hankins a little bit. She shot really well in that second half.
Yeah, Kara McFadden also shot very, very well in that second half. But the thing was is they all were shooting well on that half. Clara Paige Miller, Macy Justice, Mia Hankins, Kara McFadden, all shooting well from 3, but then also if they weren't shooting from 3, they were finding people down low to be able to get those easy layup points. And that's really what took them ahead of this game against Westminster. And I think that is what they need to continue to do later on in these next matchups that they're going to be having.
The first matchup against St. Vincent was early on in January. Waynesburg was outscored in the second half pretty badly in that game, but since then they've been a relatively good second half team. So what does Waynesburg need to do to keep that up tonight and have a good second half?
They just need to continue to pressure, and they only lost by 10 points, 76-66. It was a very winnable game. They also didn't have as strong as a second half as we talked about. They didn't have that strong of it in that January matchup. They had a stronger first quarter than they did their third quarter. I think if they just continue to have that better second half that they've been having, continue to do that, and they'll continue to flourish. But the biggest thing was the fouls. They let up 20 total points from the free throw line for St. Vincent. That's free points. Just continuing to make those fouls really did hurt this team, and St. Vincent took advantage of it. They were 20 from 29 at the free throw line, just continuing to limit those fouls. They did really well limiting them against Westminster. If they limit them against St. Vincent, I think that they can definitely have a shot to win this game.
Now, as far as playoff aspirations are concerned, the women basically need to win their last 4 games to make it. Do you think that'll fuel them, that desperation aspect?
I don't think that in this aspect, looking to playoffs is the best bet. I think right now, coming off of a season where you only had 5 conference wins last season, right now, you're already ahead of that, and you're at 11-10. In that, you only need 2 more wins to have a winning season. I think going for a winning season goal is a better goal than going for the playoffs. Within the playoffs right now, if we were to win out, that would be great, but you would also need Bethany to at least lose 1 as well in order to feel a little bit more comfortable, because you lost your first 2 against Bethany early in the season. So in this aspect, I think maybe having 1 loss to Washington and Jefferson isn't going to be the worst thing. Getting a win against St. Vincent and then getting those last 2 wins against Franciscan and Teal, I think that is much more doable for this team, and it's definitely more of a capable mindset to go into. So just getting that winning season, having that first winning season for Coach Jones since the last time of 2018, getting that first winning season, and then next season having your goal of playoffs, I think that is going to be the better goal to have in mind going into these games.
Well, with that being said, do you have a prediction for these last 4 games of the season?
I do. I definitely think that St. Vincent is going to be a win. I think it's going to be a little bit of a harder win for them to get, but it's going to be a hard-fought win that they're going to earn in themselves. Washington and Jefferson, you're going to Washington and Jefferson. It's not that far of a trip, but it is a trip that is well populated for Washington and Jefferson. So I'm going to count that as a loss for them. They're going to go 1-1 to start it off, but then they have Franciscan and Teal, who are at the bottom of the PAC. They're below Waynesburg. Teal also has not been able to have a win in quite a few seasons, so I think getting that win against Teal for their senior day is definitely going to be a thing. And then Franciscan, I think they can pull out that win, going 3-1 to end the season on a high streak, but then also ending it total and an overall winning season. I think that is going to be a great thing to have for this women's team.
For the last couple games, we've kind of seen Tori Wesolowski step up. You already mentioned Clara Page Miller. Maddie Dayton is in that conversation as well. What have those 3 players really done in Kayla Howard's absence?
I definitely think that they've been able to understand that the rebounds is what's going to be important, and they've continued to be able to do that. Now, you also have Maddie Dayton, that's a senior right now, that we're going to be losing in these coming games. She's going to be gone after that. So next season, looking to have Kayla Howard back is definitely going to be a strong point. But in this aspect, Wesolowski's been able to keep her pacing very well, and Moorbacher, same in that. They keep the pacing for the team. They keep them centered, they keep them available, and they keep them driving to continue to do better and to score more points.
When we come back, we'll keep it on the hardwoods talking to Benicio DeFalco about men's basketball. And we're back here on our final segment of Jacket Sports Weekly. It's still Anthony DeFilippo and Breck Ambita, but we're joined by Benicio DeFalco to talk about men's basketball. Benny, 24 lead changes in that loss against Westminster on Saturday. What did you think about that, and how did the team stay competitive throughout the game?
So it just came down to Westminster, their big 3 hitting shots. Drew Wire had 22 points, and then Mick Herben-Rother had 19 points and 6 rebounds, along with Alex Wathwell with 13 points and 10 rebounds. They were just able to get to their spots. Anton Baker had a good game for the Yellow Jackets, 22 and 19. But we also saw Jalen Davis with 13 and 9, one of his best performances of the season. But guys weren't able to get going on offense. PJ Suggs was held to 10 points, the majority of those coming in the second half. And with outcomes like that, it's going to be hard to win games. But you mentioned they were able to stay competitive in this one versus a very talented Westminster lineup, which gives you a little bit of hope as the season starts to wind down.
The first matchup against Westminster, Waynesburg won by double digits. What happened?
It's just simply, like I think I kind of alluded to it a little bit there, just guys weren't able to get going on offense. Other than Anton Baker with 22 points and 19 rebounds. Other than that, like I mentioned, PJ Suggs, 10 points, a majority of those coming in the second half, kind of late in game where it didn't matter as much, along with Jalen Goins, who's been definitely more consistent as the season has gone along. He had 10 points on the night as well. But those guys, they're going to have better showings because it's came down to this all season long. Anton Baker and PJ Suggs, they were putting up good numbers, and then teams started to kind of isolate those 2 guys and sort of figure out this Waynesburg offense. Other guys haven't been able to get going, and that's kind of been the storyline all season.
Well, you just mentioned it. That's kind of been a theme all year, Waynesburg blowing some of these leads late in the game. What do you think they can do in their Final Four to kind of fix what they've done to this point in the season in that area?
Well, a big part of it, I think, is going to be coming down to injury. Rashad Hooper did not play versus Westminster. His health is going to be a big factor in the games going on. He's not big on the scoring part of things, but in terms of rebounds, this guy can get you 10 rebounds a night. He's currently, I think, 7 on the season, which in the whole PAC, he's ranked 7th. So I think that shows a lot, especially with the guy coming off the bench, his impact. And then Casey Kazee, he made his first start in a while after he missed a couple weeks. He made his first start. He only had 4 points, so he's still getting comfortable. He looks a little dinged up as well, but those guys coming back into stride and getting healthier is definitely going to help, along with just the guys we've been talking about all season long with Anton Baker and PJ Suggs. They're going to have their showings, so you got to look for some of those other guys to step up.
Waynesburg has St. Vincent tonight. The previous matchup earlier on in January, a 20-point win for St. Vincent, and that was without their best player, Jaden Gales. So what can Waynesburg do differently? What needs to change from that game?
Well, for starters, it's going to be extremely difficult. St. Vincent, they have 3 scorers over 14 points with Devo Strowski, Mike Lozolino, and Ossian Jones. Those guys over 14 points per game. You mentioned Jaden Gales. He hasn't even really started getting going in PAC play yet. He's only played a couple games with the Bobcats so far. He's still getting comfortable in that offense. His scoring numbers haven't been huge. I expect him to have a great showing versus Waynesburg. But I will say this is a game that I could see Waynesburg end up winning just with how the season has gone along. They go on these losing streaks. They manage to get 1 or 2 games, and then they go on another losing streak to follow Waynesburg's do.
The final 4 games for the men match the women. It's St. Vincent, Washington and Jefferson, Franciscan, and then Teal. What would you consider a success from those final 4 games as far as the wins and losses are concerned? And then what do you want to see as far as growth towards next season?
So success-wise, I would say just at least going 500, 2-2, because you mentioned those teams that they're facing, some of them are going to be extremely difficult. Washington and Jefferson, they've been proven to be a problem for Waynesburg for the years past, especially with that rivalry. I know Waynesburg got the best of them last season at their home court, so it's going to be hard on the road, taking on Washington and Jefferson. St. Vincent, they're one of the best teams in the PAC to this point, so those games are going to be hard, so expect them to try to slip one out versus Teal or Franciscan. But like I mentioned, I would not be surprised if they were able to get one here in St. Vincent. But in terms of player development, I'd like to see Jalen Goins and Casey Kazee start to get going. These are 2 players that are going to be returning next season. So if they can build a little bit of confidence as the season ends to go into next season, and you know that these guys are going to be consistent going into next season, I'd like to see them get more involved in the offense and maybe even get a few more minutes.
There is a lot of seniors on the current roster. Is there any chance that any of those guys are shut down so you can find out who some of your glue guys are next year that can play more minutes?
Well, St. Vincent, we talked about how good Jaden Gales is offensively. He's just as good on the defensive side of things. He's going to be giving Anton Baker, guys like that, problems. St. Vincent, you're going to look for the guys like Jalen Goins, maybe even Jalen Davis. I mean, hasn't been consistent too good this season. I mean, he's missed a little bit of time, and he's kind of been dealing with that injury all season long. It's been apparent in his play, but it seems like he's been the healthiest he has been to this point. So I'd expect him to have another good showing. Kind of similar to what he did versus Westminster. Nothing crazy, like that 15-point range. And, you know, he's 6'7". He's going to get the rebound. So hopefully he can make an impact in that. Waynesburg honestly has done a good job all season long in the rebounds department, as they've out-rebounded their opponents in almost all of these 4 losses they've had. So I think they do it again, and that would be a big impact.
This team also has some of their better 3-point shooters coming back, Scott Bilivis, Aiden Blake. What do you hope to see from them in these final 4 games as they continue to build some of the inconsistencies that maybe they've had throughout the season?
So Scott's had pretty consistent playing time all season long. Now, the other name you mentioned there, Aiden Blake, he only had, I believe, 7 minutes in the loss to Westminster. We saw him play the majority of time just a week ago, and it's just going to come down to consistency and minutes for guys like that. Aiden Blake, he hasn't played much in the season. We saw him start to get things going last week, and like I said, the 7 minutes of play in Westminster, he doesn't have much time to show what he's capable of, so I'd like to see his minutes increase as the season goes along. Honestly, just all those guys I kind of mentioned off the bench that haven't seen much time, I'd expect to see them get a little bit more as the season progresses, just because to this point, Waynesburg is do or die. They lose versus St. Vincent. Their chances are a lot slimmer, so I'd like to see them start to look forward to next season a little bit.
3-point shooting has not really been one of the main philosophies among this team this year. Should they attempt more 3-pointers in the last 4 games to kind of maybe they could go. Maybe some guys could go on a hot streak for start of next year, give them some confidence.
I 100% agree with that. I mean, the more shots you're going to take, the more shots that are going to go in. I know it sounds like cliche, but I mean, Jalen Goins, guys like that, Scott Bilvis, the more three-pointers they attempt, the more confidence they're going to build. We've seen Scott. That guy is reigning with confidence no matter what time he's entered the court. It seems like every time he's in, he has an automatic three, whether it's a make or miss. I'd like to see him attempt more, because then with the shots, we mentioned the confidence will start to build as well.
Thank you, Benicio, for joining us to talk about men's basketball. That'll do it for this week's episode of JSW. From myself, Brett Gambita, my other co-host, Anthony DeFilippo, and everyone behind the scenes, thank you for watching, and stay tuned.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.